This panel is called Organizing Effectively to Implement a Green New Deal in Our Communities, and it brings together activists from a variety of local Green New Deal related campaigns that have been or are currently being launched throughout the state in order to discuss strategies and lessons learned that will help progressive activists organize effectively. Now I'm going to introduce the moderator for this panel, and then he will introduce the panelists. So Joe Galliani has been called a creative greenius and has worked as a creative director, writer, brand strategist, and subject matter expert in various top businesses. He was a top freelancer and worked pro bono later as a volunteer on environmental issues and projects. He served on the staff of CBS Eco Media, where he was the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Public Affairs. Their team funded environmental, education, and wellness projects across the U.S. He left when the climate crisis demanded his full-time attention, and he went back to work as the pro bono organizer of South Bay, Los Angeles 350 Climate Action Group. From May 2014 through September 2017, he worked full-time as the chair of the South Bay Clean Power Working Group, and in that capacity brought community choice aggregation to LA County. He has spent his entire career inventing and delivering creative solutions that inspire and motivate people to action. Long before his professional career began, his love for unspoiled wilderness and wildlife drove him to the green side. So welcome, please, Joe Galliani.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I just have to say what a pleasure it is to be here in San Luis Obispo. I love this town. We have maybe the best progressive mayor in the United States of America. I also want to show great respect and love for the Chumash tribe, whose land we stand on. I am, as many of you can tell just by looking at me, a settler. I am also a member since 1957 of the Lucky Sperm Club. As a white American male baby boomer, no one has been given greater privilege or a lift up than I. So if I screw up today, it's all my fault. I would be remiss right now if I didn't remind every single one of you with a cell phone, per Lauren Steiner, to share the live feed of this event happening now with every single person you know. So go to facebook.com/Lauren.SteinerLA and make that happen, or we will all be in trouble. So we're here to talk about the Green New Deal. And I've already had a couple of interesting discussions with different people here because everybody has their own interpretation of what the Green New Deal is. And we seem to have a challenge in dealing with a bill that is a resolution open for discussion. And for our purposes here today, we're going to acknowledge that the Green New Deal is not specific legislation that we're ready to vote on. That it is instead an opportunity for all of us to weigh in on what the Green New Deal is. And so we have some terrific people here with fantastic experience in their own right, and we're going to have, hopefully, a lively back and forth discussion with this group and encompass all of you as well. So let me get right to it and introduce our esteemed panel. At the far left, a friend of mine, Jessica Guadalupe Tovar, is of the local Clean Energy Alliance, San Francisco Bay Area in California. Jessica grew up, yes, please, give them some applause. Jessica, unlike me, grew up in housing projects near an industrial pollution corridor in East Los Angeles. Some of the worst air pollution in the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen. The experience of cancer in her family led Jessica to focus on preventing and reducing local industrial pollution and advocate for policies to protect vulnerable communities. In the Bay Area, she helped shut down the PG&E 100 Point power plant in 2004. Thank you. She also successfully mobilized against the tar sands dirty crude expansion of the Chevron Richmond oil refinery in 2010. Jessica organizes for clean power to the people, campaigning for local clean energy solutions through Alameda County Community Choice Energy Program, East Bay Community Energy. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Here on my immediate left, another good friend, Auda Vasquez. Auda was appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power Board of Commissioners in 2017. She is the youngest commissioner to ever serve on that board. She is a Latina immigrant to the United States from Colombia. Viva Colombia! Auda started as a community organizer for the PICO network, working for state and federal immigrant rights. A key activist in achieving the ban on single-use plastic bags in Los Angeles. She was also a prominent player in the groundbreaking Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. LA, as a result, will be getting off coal by 2025, a mere As a commissioner of the LA DWP, Auda helps guide the largest publicly owned utility in the United States, serving more than 500,000 water customers and 1.4 million electricity customers. She is a board member of the League of Conservation Voters and also the principal of Vasquez Solutions. She's got more than a decade of experience in New York, DC, and California, creating narratives that transform communities and offer hopeful visions of the future for their citizens. Thank you, Auda. Next to Auda is Melvin Willis, who first came to public attention in 2013 when he earned the Mario Savio Young Activist Award for his work in the community. In 2016, he was elected to the Richmond City Council and served as vice mayor in 2018. He ran for mayor of Richmond in 2018, and while unsuccessful in that bid, he did garner over 44% of the vote. Is that more than Trump got? Maybe. Melvin serves on the Richmond Progressive Alliance, the RPA, steering committee, and for the last 7 years he has worked as a community organizer with the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, where he defends homeowners from the greed of banks and speculators. As a member of the Richmond City Council, Melvin helped pass the first California rent control law in 30 years. He helped expand health care for the undocumented in Contra Costa County and introduced the ordinance that will increase the minimum wage in Richmond to $15 an hour. On the environmental front, Melvin has been a warrior in the fight against Chevron, which owns a major oil refinery in Richmond, demanding accountability from the global fossil fuel corporation. I might add that they wreck the climate for profit. Next, and certainly not least, our final panelist, Benjamin Eichert, is the director of the Romero Institute's Greenpower initiative. Benjamin's passion for social justice organizing began over 20 years ago. Right after high school, he and two friends bought an old van and drove from New Mexico to Nicaragua, volunteering in rural communities. Following that trip, he co-founded Big Noise Films and directed the award-winning documentary Zapatista. Zapatista. My Spanish needs work, ladies and gentlemen. He has worked as a union organizer and contract negotiator at the New York State Nurses Association, and he was the field director for U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's successful re-election campaign in 2012. Benjamin studied political science at Brown University. Those are our panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Before we try to define the Green New Deal, I'd like to get the temperature read from each of you individually on your organization and your own sense of urgency in a Green New Deal. And the question I want to ask each of you, and we'll start with you, Auda, is what's your ticking clock deadline for this?
Right now. We have to act right now. I think the Green New Deal as a national resolution has really given us the opportunity to highlight the work that a lot of us have been doing for decades, that others before us have been doing for decades, and a lot of the environmental justice groups that have been working on bringing green jobs, no brainer, reduce of greenhouse gas emissions, justice for those communities that have been polluted, intentionally polluted,
mistreated and have experienced environmental racism. A new way to see the world, and mostly really take our planet seriously, the health of our planet, and therefore our health very, very seriously as part of our values. I feel in this country, and particularly trickling down to California and to the city of Los Angeles, we see a lot of what we call progressive values, but they're not progressive enough. Not progressive enough. So yeah, so that's my pick.
Very good. Melvin, what's the amount of patience you have left?
What if I have none at all? No, I mean, having this conversation about the Green New Deal is very important, and it's exciting because it forces all of us to take climate change seriously, and how the fossil fuel economy and this polluted economy is not only affecting communities like Richmond, considering we have a Chevron right next to us in the community, but for me this is also a racial justice issue, as said, because if you look at refineries, I'm not an expert on this and I haven't looked at a map or have data, but all I can say is that I talk to many people, and every time I talk to somebody that says they have a refinery in their community, it's always in a community that's people of color who are low income. But whenever you talk about more affluent communities, I'm thinking around myself, Lafayette, where I think the CEO of Chevron still lives, or Danville, they don't have refineries in their community. They're not poor, working class communities. It's us, the people in these frontline communities, people who are struggling, trying to survive day after day, that are exposed to these toxins and exposed to the danger of when something happens. In 2012, we had a refinery fire that lasted 5 hours. That sent 15,000 people in Richmond to the only hospital that we had, and then that hospital ended up closing, and they didn't think it was on them to make sure that we had a hospital for the pollution that they're putting into our community. Right. So having this conversation is important because climate change is now in everybody's lips, whereas 10 years ago people said, oh, I'm not going to be alive for that. That's not going to be up for everybody else. Yeah, y'all remember those conversations, right? How many of y'all talk to somebody that says, I'm not worried about climate change because I'm going to be dead by the time it comes?
Yeah.
Well, let's see it right now.
End of the century, man.
Exactly. So it's important that we have now. The clock is ticking, and we need to start this just transition out of fossil fuels, including renewable energy, right now.
Thank you. Let me sit down to you, Jeff, and then come back to you, Bill. So you've got plenty of time to wait for a Green New Deal, don't you?
Yeah. So certainly I feel very strongly that this is something we needed to address a long time ago. Yeah. And let me just remind people that a lot of us did, right? Yeah. I first heard of the Green New Deal through the Green Party. Mm-hmm. And this was a long time ago. The other thing I've heard is that it came largely through also the labor movement and the need to create this new green industry of jobs, right? But where I'm at is, I believe there is a transition and it's starting to happen, but the big question is who's going to benefit and who's going to lose, right? And communities like mine have been losing for a long time. We have been heavily burdened by pollution, by dirty fossil fuel energy, and in my community where I grew up, there's like several gas-fired power plants, okay? In addition to all kinds of other stuff, crematoriums, factories, diesel traffic, you know, and this is housing projects in metropolitan Los Angeles. And our health has been compromised as a result of that, right? And I'm certainly feeling the effects of that and still fighting this industry. So I see this energy burden as something that we really need to transform, but it needs to be transformed so that people in my community, people of color, the poorest people, the hardest working people, immigrant people, actually benefit. We know what trickle down means. And we know that crumbs, right? We need to be at the center of the decision making and transform our communities into hubs of clean energy, solutions for our community to address those needs of our community in terms of improving our health and our safety, and so much more. I'll stop right there.
Yeah.
So Ben, how long are you willing to wait for a Green New Deal?
So I think there are two things that it's important to understand. Number one, global carbon emissions rose last year, the highest percentage increase I think since 2013. And economic inequality in this country and worldwide is the worst it's been in generations. So the time to act was yesterday. And all of the advocacy work that our organization does with community leaders and elected officials, what we say is we can no longer afford to move at the speed of politics as usual.
You're here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. So let's get into a little of the nitty-gritty right now, because at the moment the Green New Deal can mean almost anything any of us want it to mean, and that's not a bad thing. We have a proposal on the table now that has some core elements, but it also has a lot of unknown elements. And some folks might talk about criticizing the Green New Deal in its current state, but I don't really think it's open to criticism because it's still a blueprint that's being written. And the original call for the Green New Deal in Pelosi's office was to put together a select subcommittee, no oil money being taken by any members, and then to spend 12 months taking all of the proposals that are on the table, debating them, having discussions, and then coming up at the end of 12 months with a final bill. That was the original discussion. But what I'd like to talk about now is what your interpretation and what your priorities among this panel are. When we talk about a Green New Deal, let me ask a couple of questions for you to comment on. How do we effectively communicate what it is and what it isn't? With such a nebulous proposal at this point, each of us have priorities. The other question I want to ask you is, how do you make it sound positive and enticing to take advantage of the polling that we've all seen? Over 60% of Americans agree that we need a Green New Deal. They may not know exactly what it is, but they know we need it. So how do we take advantage of that? And let's start with you, Mel.
All right, perfect. Yeah, just going back to what I said when, saying that this is something immediate that needs to happen now. I've been an organizer with ACE for 7.5 years and on the Richmond Progressive Alliance Steering Committee for 6.5 years. But one thing that I notice on any issue that I work on is making sure that there is a racial and economic justice component attached to it, because it really speaks to the more marginalized communities that are suffering from having refineries like this in their community, or any issue, like how many foreclosures have happened to people that have primarily impacted Black and brown community members in this nation. How many people are being displaced from communities that they lived in for generations, and when you start seeing and identifying the data that shows majority of Black and brown community members have been impacted by these issues, there starts to be more of a stronger movement. It starts to connect to people more who can really relate and identify with somebody who's really impacted by it. When I say that 15,000 people in Richmond were sent to the hospital, that's a mixture of folks, but a lot of the folks you would see in that hospital room, a lot of the folks that would turn out to city council meetings to speak on this, to talk about how they were impacted, guess what race they were? Black and brown community members. So for me, thinking about the Green New Deal and how to really sell it is that this is a racial, economic, and environmental justice issue. Already in Richmond, we have done things to promote job programs for people to take advantage of and learn how to install solar. We invited a group called Marine Clean Energy to come into Richmond and give people the opportunity to opt into a more renewable energy source. And we've even pushed the narrative so much about how much this Chevron refinery is impacting the community that whenever they wanted to do their modernization project, which wasn't really a modernization project, it was a hydrogen renewal project that they wanted to get off the ground, that they say we're modernizing the refinery. Not only did we push the narrative in conversation, working together in coalition with multiple groups led by RPA, CBE, AFN, but they put in about over $90 million into a community benefits agreement for that project, and $30 million of that was to go towards greenhouse gas reduction. So constantly pushing that narrative on the impacts of the community and how they're suffering from the environmental impacts, and allying yourself with people in the healthcare industry like nurses that could even show data on how many respiratory issues that people are going through, or chronic issues just from the pollution that they're putting in the community, is something that really drives this campaign. And I believe that it's going to be a part of a component, a piece of the puzzle that's really going to drive this real just transition out of a fossil fuel economy and start taking seriously the fact that we need a renewable energy economy right now that everybody can benefit from and that our environment can benefit from as well.
Excellent. Let me ask a tough question to you, Laura. You're with the governor. You're a commissioner with the LA DWP. I think everyone in this room understands that the Green New Deal is much more than just 100% renewable. It is about equity. It is about racial equity. Let me ask you the question. Can you sell that to the white people in LA? Are they going to buy that?
There's more brown people in LA now than white people.
I think that that's a really good question, and not only to the white people in LA, but I think who we really need to change the minds of ours to also, and try to create a much more comprehensive narrative, is also the labor movement.
Yeah.
The labor movement has been advocating for green jobs for so long, and the time is now, and that opportunity is here. And the Green New Deal is really a vision that gives us, it's kind of like, I see it as a canvas where we can paint the dream that we want, and that's the power that locally we have. And I think in Los Angeles and in a lot of other places, we need to really also, as we push for a much more renewable energy portfolio and a future, and a lot of places you see 100% renewables is the new tagline. We also need to bring our brothers and sisters from labor with us. Yes. Because in a lot of ways, we don't see eye to eye, sadly, and sometimes they even at the other spectrum, but this is the perfect opportunity where we can really revitalize an industry that has been dominated by white people, you know, the people in the renewable energy industry, and really help them also embrace labor. I feel like that's extremely important, and at the Department of Water and Power, where we have one of the most powerful IBEW, Electrical Workers Union, in the country. Yeah. To having their support and to help them understand that we were creating good jobs that can take people that have been incarcerated and are in re-entry, that can take women, that can take people that have been affected by pollution and enter them into a new path to good jobs, was extremely important. So I think that that's one thing. And now, my privileged people and my white allies, as I like to think of them, I think a lot of them, they love this talking point about the planet and the environment, and that is necessary, right? But I think we're clear that we need to have at the center conversation of all these changes the people that are most affected by climate change and by pollution and by the lack of jobs that we can generate right now with the green, clean economy.
Let me pick up on the labor line. So I think we've got a few things on the table. We can agree that it's about 100% renewable. We can agree that it is about equity in terms of racial. I think we can agree that this is a labor issue. But Jessica, let me take the labor side for you, because I know both you and I, in our activist work, have often been in community meetings where the union or the refinery sends uniformed workers to argue against everything we ask for. Now you can speak to part of that is that they're trapped, that they have that job that provides great work and benefits, and they're afraid, and their union can send them all in a bus. So how do we bridge that gap between us going at loggerheads and bring us together as allies?
That's a great question.
So one of the things I want to, I try to focus on is like root causes, like what's at the heart of this problem, right? When you break it down, it's the monopoly utilities, right? It's the employer, right, that's holding these workers hostage, holding our movement hostage, and impeding us from actually moving forward and working together. That's where the heart of it is. And I have to remember that when I encounter some very demeaning, I call them bullies, and folks in labor. And the only way we've been able to deal with that is because of progressives in labor. You being there and holding your own accountable, and it goes the same for white people, holding your own accountable is the only way we're going to get to the other side that we're trying to. We have had success in the East Bay. I'm the coordinator of a group called the East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and we've been advocating for a community choice program in the East Bay area, Alameda County. And we had some wins with labor. Actually, it was 2016. Very difficult discussions with labor heads, and specifically IBEW and others. But it was their own labor allies, specifically the California Nurses Association.
Thank God for the nurses.
And no surprise that it was women holding men accountable and making them face the reality that the only way we're going to get jobs, clean energy jobs in our community, is if they back off and work with us.
That's right.
And so that's what happened in 2016. We advocated together for what we call a local development business plan, which is actually a Green New Deal for Alameda County. And so we won that study. It was like $500,000 to do the study of how to create jobs, where to place solar, where to place wind, how to do energy efficiency so that you create work, reduce waste of energy. And it's just a comprehensive plan for how to do that, how to incentivize projects in communities like community shared solar, for example. There's so much more, and I want to talk about that. But I want to address what you asked earlier about what it isn't. To me, what it isn't is it's not market purchase energy. A lot of market purchase energy is filled with false solutions. Carbon-free is a pitfall. Carbon-free, large hydroelectric damming is carbon-free energy. Nuclear energy is considered carbon-free. If we commit to 100% on the market, we're committing to continuing that same burden and racism that destroys communities like mine, that destroys indigenous communities, that destroys complex ecosystems. So that's what it isn't. That I like to use that the analogy of applying the concept of local food to energy. And if you think about it that way, that's how we're going to get to 100% clean energy. If it's built here at home, and if it's benefiting our local communities, making us be able to afford energy. I mean, really, it should be free. Right? The sun is free. But make it as affordable as possible and incentivize the communities that have been mentioned here on the panel. I'm going to stop right there. I could keep going.
Thanks. That was wonderful. So, Benjamin, I saw you nodding when Jessica was talking about what it isn't. How do we've been talking about what we like about it, how do we prevent our allies who are pro-nuclear, who want us to include hydro, who want us to include something they call renewable natural gas? So how do we define the Green New Deal to prevent those kind of false solutions becoming part of it?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm not sure it comes in the definition of the Green New Deal. I mean, I'll just say briefly, the approach that we take is that the Green New Deal is really two different things fused together. Mm-hmm. It's a New Deal a la FDR that's based around addressing economic inequality, and it's a Green Deal for our planet. And they support each other and they synthesize with each other. And so we can tackle both problems by implementing one package that addresses both of those problems. And so I think that's how we talk about it as well. We talk about what are the problems that we're trying to address. And, as Our mentioned and others mentioned, communities of color are at the center of it. It's like a Venn diagram, right? Who are the communities that have been environmentally devastated? And they are the same communities that have been most economically oppressed, right? So they're at the center of these two things. So, in any event, when we talk about averting sort of false solutions, I'm not so sure it's about how we define it, it's about how we organize around it. And I believe that our organizing around a Green New Deal has to be bottom up. It has to start with the localist of things in our community. And when you organize in your community knows that building a nuclear power plant in your community is not the right solution. And so if we build this bottom up, then we bake the right solutions in from the very beginning.
There's another elephant in the room for me about Green New Deal. And if you take a look at this panel, and indeed if you take a look around the room, I think it's safe to say that the majority of us here are over 30. I was taught never to trust anybody over 30 myself.
And there's 90 million millennials.
So here's the question, and let me personalize this a little. I only want to work with Sunshine Movement, with Justice Democrats, with Climate Strike Kids. I love all of you, but I am done working with adults. I've worked with adults for 30 years. That demographic has completely disappointed me. So I want to know what efforts each of you and your organizations are taking to encompass and embrace the Sunshine Movement, the Justice Democrats, and the Climate Strike Kids. And I also want to know how powerful and vital to this Green New Deal do you think the youth groups that I just mentioned are? So let's start with you.
Absolutely. So in Los Angeles, the Sunrise Movement was so important to our fight to get the 3 gas plants at Scattergood, Hines, and Harbor to retire this year. It was really them leading the way to push the Department of Water and Power and to push Mayor Eric Garcetti and to work with this inside-outside strategy to really take us there. So I couldn't address or highlight enough the importance of youth. I mean, but it was not only them. I saw at my meetings, as a commissioner, I got to hear the public comments, and I saw so many other youth of South LA coming to speak about what happens in their communities, representing, their own organizations like Communities for a Better Environment and other organizations that came to also say, these gas plants affect my community, and we need, the green jobs, we need reduced pollution, and we need to be at the center of the conversation. So I couldn't be more excited also to see young people participating in this movement. We need them. We need them, and it's our duty to also let them do it the way they want to do it. Yeah. I feel like that's very important.
So are you willing to let them lead?
I mean, I have, and even for me as someone that was kind of working on the inside, right? Like as a commissioner, I was the decision maker. You're laughing because you know what I'm talking about. Like as a decision maker, I explained to them, the internal dynamics, and I was like, go do what you think is best. Because, a lot of us have an institutional knowledge. I have been organizing since I was 11 years old. I'm 40 years old. It's been a long time. But, times change. And they were organizing a little differently, and they were very skillful with, like, for example, social media. Yeah. They really utilize social media to speak to a constituency that would have never known that we were really fighting this like huge giant, you know, and they participated on a round table, what we like to organically call the LA 100. So how do we get, you know, LA to move forward? And you know, I feel like we need to learn how to uplift the voices of young people.
Yes.
And let them lead and give the space to them to open.
So, are you willing to step back and let the kids step up?
Looking at me.
Yeah.
You look like a child.
Funny plug, I think I might be the only person on this panel that is under 30 because I'm 28.
Well, now I feel really old.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's important to actually take a step back and let young folks take a lead, but also provide encouragement. I mean, some of the best conversations that I've had with young people was me talking to them like I would talk to any of y'all. I'm not patronizing, and I'm actually interested in figuring out, like, what is the issue that they're interested in? Somebody raised their hand. I was just talking to somebody earlier today, but they said that they have these peace groups that they organize in the school. Raise your hand to be recognized, or there you go. Yeah, and she said the most important thing that I do when it comes to organizing, it's about opening up space for them to give their own ideas, their own fresh perspectives, and even create options like today we want to just talk about environmental justice. What do you know? What don't you know? And just say, here's what we think from our perspective, and be able to get that feedback and connect it to issues, because young people were just trying to learn and trying to figure it out. But I've never seen a conversation go well where someone feels like that they know everything and they want people to be a part of their movement, and they're saying, you need to join this is important, and if you don't join it, you're going to hell. I've never seen that really work out.
This didn't work out for Dianne Feinstein.
However, being able to talk and be inviting and creating open space, but also giving that encouragement of pushing people up, because a lot of us, even adults, we get stage fright. So how do you think a young person's going to feel when you're just saying, okay, go speak to 100 people about why you think environmental justice is important? It's just good to offer that perspective. And actually, we have another person in here who is a young person in here who's 13 years old from the Bay Area who just got involved, from my understanding, because she got involved just because she simply cared. Nobody encouraged her. Nobody told her to do anything. She looked at the world around her and said, I'm tired of this and I want to do something about it. So identify for the young people in your community, what does environmental justice mean to them? What are the issues that they're facing and how do they want to work? And they'll start to weave in and figure out that all the issues we're working on are connected. And one last thing I'll leave you with is, during the summer, there's this school called Leadership in Richmond. They do these little tours to show the different work that's happening in Richmond. And one of the tours is taking a tour of the Chevron refinery. And oh, do these kids grill the Chevron refinery tourists. They ask, what is that cloud coming out of the refinery? Oh, that's just steam. Oh, steam. So, not pollution or anything like that. Well, you know, we got to do this. Oh, and what about all the flaring that happens? Oh, it's important that we do flaring. Why? Well, so the refinery doesn't blow up. Well, that's concerning. And why did you spend over $3 million to buy up a local election? Well, if people are coming after your business, you're going to want to do everything you can to protect it too.
Right.
These young people, grill them. They're smart. They're knowledgeable. You just got to give them that platform and just fill in the missing blanks of information so they can grow into a stronger leader, be able to pass that information on to the next generation. But give them the open platform. Don't be patronizing. Treat them like adults that are just learning a new issue for the first time.
Thank you. Jessica, should we be helping our young friends go on strike every Friday, and should those climate strikes spread to become general strikes?
Yeah. You know, one thing that I want to just really emphasize is they didn't wait for us to take a step back. They took 10 steps forward and took the stage, and I really appreciate that of our young folks. I'm somewhere in the middle. I got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. But one of the things that I note is that when youth are tasked with these issues and imagining them in positions of power, they don't have the corporate manipulation that a lot of us adults do. And so they apply very basic logic to problem solving. And it's like one of the most beautiful things to see that. I just remember, because I've also done work in some indigenous communities, and I was asking folks in the room what health meant to them. And there was a little girl who was about 6, 7 years old, and she said happiness was health to her. And everybody in the room got so quiet and was like, because our definition was so complicated. So when it came to this child, she broke it down with one simple word, right? So that's just an example of how connected they are and how disconnected we are, and how we need to learn from them, right? Another thing that I feel like I note all the time is how brand new their brains are. And so how much more efficient they are at using it, where I feel like I'm taking a long time to grasp, and break down the language. When I hear people use terms like distributed energy resources, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Why don't we just call it local clean energy? I understand that, and so does everybody else in the room. So,
consultants can't get paid for that.
Branding, exactly. Clean power to the people. That's what I'm working for. And one of the things that I think that the youth really emphasize and remind us of is that they're inheriting everything. The mess that we created, but they're also inheriting the cleanup, right? And so they're running away with these tools. We've been talking about community choice energy as a solution to all these issues of pollution with clean energy and creating jobs. And improving health and safety and making things more affordable and more just at home. And when they're addressing issues, problems in the community, using that as we're fighting this no coal terminal in Oakland, but this is what we want, instead of locking us into the next generation or more of dirty energy. So, like I said, I don't feel like I even need to take a step back, man. They're so ahead of us and so focused, and I'm just very humbled by it. Very, very so much moved. But, we have access to things that they don't necessarily, right? Including voting, right? So giving them the tools that they need to run with, and they run with it. I appreciate the folks like Youth. I think they're called Youth Against the Apocalypse in the Bay Area. Those were some of the folks that were addressing Feinstein in that video. Youth versus the Apocalypse. I mean, the name alone, when they organize though, and we have to take a lesson because we can get really boring when we talk about these issues. When they talk about it, it's spoken word, it's artistic, it's interesting, it's fun. Some of us need to go back to that, right? To go back to being a kid and being uninhibited and nap time. I want nap time as an organizer right now.
It's right after lunch. Let me give you a shot at this, Benjamin. How are you working with kids or empowering younger people to be part of this?
Sure. Well, first I'll say that, I reflect on my own experience. When I was younger, right after I graduated from high school, I got to know some folks who were older than me. And instead of them saying, "Oh, you want to be part of changing the world? Come work for me. I've got a project you can be a part of." It was, "Well, what do you want to do? And how can I support that? How can I help you make that possible?" So I was very fortunate to have that experience. And so I think we all need to try to replicate that. model. At our organization specifically, for a long time, we continue to do it. We work with the local colleges and we bring in interns every single semester, every single quarter. And we, a good internship program done right is not go get coffee or just do this menial task. It should actually cost you and your organization something. You should be taking the time and the energy to teach these people, to give them space to do what they can do. You should get less out of it in a certain sense, right? It's totally the wrong model to think of an internship as like free, cheap labor. It should actually cost your organization something, but the value that we will all get from it is immeasurable. Yeah. I also think that it is about, I think Melvin used this term and others as well, it's about creating space. And that's actually an active process. It's not necessarily stepping aside. It's not youth and us, right? Creating space is an active thing that you do, and it in this political world, it takes energy, right? Creating space means holding back the powers that are trying to fight against us, creating reinforcement, providing support. So it's not a let me step aside, it's let's work together, but let me create a space for you to lead. Sunrise and Justice Democrats, they were founded by people about our age, right? Yeah. It's not that they're completely absent from those organizations and not part of that movement. They're working together, they're creating space for young people to lead. So we're trying to do that at our organization, and I encourage everybody, if you're part of an organization, a business, whatever it is, create that space. It's worth it for sure.
Right now, I think we've, as a panel, used up most of our time. We want to give folks in the audience a chance to ask some questions. We hope you won't pontificate. That's a separate session.
But we need to sequester carbon, pull it out of the air where it's pollutant and fix it in the soil to build the life of the soil, which also makes the soil so that the water sinks in instead of running off. And so we have the technology to do that, and it's called a tree. Really strongly encourage everybody to get the carbon sequestration part. And my verbiage for that is we want to promote regenerative organic farming.
So this is actually, carbon sequestration is something that our organization has started to really look into. And we're pursuing some opportunities to work with range landowners, ranchers. So there's this interesting problem right now in California that we've passed this law that says organic waste can no longer go to the landfill where it just sits and generates all this methane. Right? We've got to do something with it. There are also recent experiments that show that if you take that and you turn it into compost and you spread it about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch across rangeland, you can actually sequester an incredible amount of carbon. So we can solve this problem of organic waste going to the landfill with a solution that can actually begin to sequester carbon, help our state meet its carbon overall carbon goals. This is, I think, a perfect example of the type of policy that could make it into a Green New Deal at the statewide level. We haven't finished our research on it, but I can tell you that in California we have so much open rangeland of a particular type where these practices could be implemented that there's, in theory, the potential that doing this across all available rangeland, we could reduce our carbon footprint by 20%, which would be about the equivalent of taking every car off the road. We could be creating a lot of jobs in the process. So it's an interesting area, and I'm sure that we're going to be hearing a lot more about it coming soon. In fact, I've heard rumors that there's a bill being floated around in Sacramento about carbon sequestration in the ocean, planting large basically farms, so that carbon can be sequestered and taken to the bottom of the ocean, which we believe at the moment is one of the most durable places to store it. Excellent.
My name is Mary Shopkoran. I'm from the Monterey, San Benito area, and I worked on the anti-fracking initiatives there. One of the things that, we actually have a group now that's actually working on Green New Deal. Our working title is Bright Future Central Coast. So one of the things that we have started to do, we've been meeting locally, and so we've been discussing the fact that, this is great that the Green New Deal is so prominent now. And so some of us approached some of our local state assembly people, Senator Bill Monty, Mark Stones, an assembly member, Robert Rivas, as well as Ana Caballero, who her husband, and we also talked to John Lowe, who's going to be our next state senator. And it seems to me that they all generally feel that it's really going to be hard to pass legislation on Green New Deal. Because we talked to them about specific bills that can be done because there is so little time, as everyone knows here. And So after doing this for a few months, and we had a meeting recently, we kind of are approaching it differently. You know, one of the things that I would like to entertain, you know, a question to you and to the whole audience is, what if all the progressives decided to work together in coalition to do a state proposition or a series of propositions, a package with the umbrella title of Green New Deal? Because I think the time is so short now. One of the things that I've observed is that our elected officials generally move much slower, and that's why we were not able to pass a ban on fracking and other risky oil drilling in San Benito County or Monterey County. It was through the citizens.
So is your question...
And my question is, would you support something like that?
But I think the issue of why we're not taking this, whether it's the local Green New Deal resolutions or how it manifests at the local level, or whether it's banning fracking, or whether it's not using any more nuclear, is because of the money in politics.
Exactly.
Until we elect people that are going to have and held those values in our communities, whether it's local, at the state level, or nationally, you're going to be asking this question every year you come here. And until we all work together to figure that out. So because what you're proposing is wonderful. It helps us, it makes us feel good. Yes, we need to work together, absolutely. But the underlying forces here is that the fossil fuel has so much money.
You just mentioned that the oil companies have all the money in the world, and both those two initiatives in San Benito and Monterey County, we were outspent 18-1 by the oil industry and prevailed anyway. So I have my doubts about the issue, and I've long had my doubts about the issue about whether big money actually buys elections or not. The point for California right now is that when you talk about the Green New Deal, the original New Deal was essentially pioneered in New York State at the state level, and then it was able to translate into the national level when Franklin Delano Roosevelt went on. We have in California supermajorities in both houses, a Democratic governor, and the strategy should be, how do we actually make significant achievements in California, like a ban on all oil, new oil?
Let's ask this gentleman to answer that question.
Okay, forgive me if I talk fastly on this. There's just a lot of information I need to fit in on this. So just switching from the Green New Deal and just talking about the housing crisis. Last year in 2017, on the wake that a bunch of rent control and housing measures got passed, a statewide coalition with 70 groups from labor, faith-based, political organizations all across California came together to create the Coalition Housing Now to talk about state policies that were exacerbating the housing crisis. One of those policies is Costa-Hawkins that puts major limitations on rent control. This coalition came together, raised about $46 million to gather signatures within 3.5 months to put the repeal of Costa-Hawkins on the ballot. We were outspent by the major investors by about $74 million to kill this. However, the fact that we had this coalition come together and the fact that the narrative of the affordable housing crisis is still alive right now, there's a bunch of bills that are going through the statewide rent stabilization, statewide just cause for eviction, and a reform of Costa-Hawkins that would significantly strengthen rent control, and that's because we had that coalition that started that narrative. So even if we get beat down by money, it's up to us to be relentless and resist until we get to the goals that we need to get.
My state assembly member, I spoke to her privately after a town hall about PG&E being bankrupt, and she said, she kind of agrees with me. I was saying, why doesn't the state take over PG&E?
Yeah, we're working on that.
Updating the microgrid and making it for renewables on a massive scale. I mean, these wildfires are costing us billions of dollars.
So is your question, why doesn't the state take over PG&E?
Monetarily more efficient.
Well, let's let Jessica get that a shot.
So going back to root problems, the problem right now is the California Public Utilities Commission. Yes. I'm going to tell you why. Because they approved a bailout for PG&E. And let me just remind people, it's not bankruptcy like we're going out of business. It's bankruptcy protection. protection to not have to pay the victims of the wildfires for the life that they destroyed and the property that they destroyed in that wildfire. Okay, the second thing is the CPUC has also approved a tax on community choice energy at the statewide level. One of them being the power charge indifference adjustment, the PCIA, or the exit fee that is charged to all community choice programs. So we have to pay this indefinite, ongoing fee. It doesn't ratchet down. It doesn't disappear. There's no transparency on the calculation of that fee. All we hear from PG&E is that we've bought all these contracts and somebody has to pay for it, and you're leaving us, so you have to pay. That's the argument. And the California Public Utilities Commission allows them to do this. And they are part of the problem. We need to get rid of Michael Picker. We need to elect commissioners. And we need to be on that commission. And until that happens, this shit is never going to change. There is a website. It's California Alliance for Community Energy, CA, communityenergy.org. We have a petition there to address that very issue. So please check out that website, because I don't have a lot of time. Thank you. It's CA for California, communityenergy.org.
Hello, everybody. This is Bill McKibben. I kind of wish I was there in San Luis Obispo, because it is, they say, I think, that it's the happiest city in the whole world, and it's certainly about the most beautiful. And on the other hand, part of me is glad to be here via Skype, not only because it's low carbon, but because I always get a little worried around the former mayor of Richmond, my great one of my great heroes, Gail McLaughlin. But you know, the last time I was in Richmond, I ended up in jail, so I got to be a little careful. I'm so grateful for the work that Gail's done over the years to try and hold Chevron to account and to try and take the experience of Richmond and spread it out across the Golden State to help people understand what's at stake here. So this founding convention is an important moment, and it comes at an important moment in the country and the planet's history. You know that I wrote the first book about climate change 30 years ago, so I've gotten to watch close up as this has spread out around the world, as we see kind of devastation. Sometimes when I'm talking to people in some places, I have to really go to work to explain what it is that's at stake. But Californians have no trouble figuring that out now. Not after the 5-year drought, not after the record floods that threatened to topple dams, not after it was impossible to watch wildfires that took places literally called paradise and turned them literally into hell. You guys know what the stakes are. And you know what the answers are, too. No place more than California have we developed the tech that helps us see what we need to be doing. We know what needs to happen, what kind of switch needs to be made. And we know that it's not just a matter of replacing, putting in solar panels. We've got to shut down the fracking, the offshore drilling, the refineries. We've got to not just open up to the new world. We've got to turn the faucet off on the old world. California is completely able to do that. At this point, oil and gas are a negligible part of the state's economy, and they need to be consigned to tradition. We need to think about oil drilling in California the same way we think about gold mining in California. Something interesting that happened a long time ago. So the possibilities of the moment, exemplified by the great rise of youthful energy around Green New Deal, by the great rise of youthful energy in these beautiful climate strikes, those are things that give one great hope, but none of it happens easily or for free. It's all going to take our hard work. And I know that hard work is what y'all are about. So bless you for it. And I will look forward very much to seeing y'all in the near future, in jail or out. and on we go. Thanks.
We're really grateful that Bill McKibben came to us by this video. We invited him in person, of course. He couldn't make it, but said he would do a video. And just to clarify, he was arrested in Richmond as part of civil disobedience against the Chevron refinery, along with others. So this was a great panel, and a great to end with Bill's wonderful video.